Hey, you're about to listen to an older episode of the Volunteer Youth Worker podcast. This is a podcast that Sid Coop, Jason Ballard, and myself, Jeremy McDonald, started back in 2018 to answer the practical questions that you're asking in your youth ministry. But lots has changed since we started it in 2018. We've changed the name. We're doing new and different events and lots of other things. The thing that hasn't changed, though, is the content you're about to listen to, we think is still really valuable. But if you notice that some of the things we're talking about are obviously a little bit older, that is okay. You can always head to youthworker.community to stay up to date with what's happening currently right now here in 2024, and you can track along with us there. We'd love to see you. But enjoy this episode. All right, episode 119 of the Youth Ministry Team Podcast. Sid and Jeremy here doing the little introduction, telling you about what this conversation's all about. And what's it all about,
Jeremy?
Sid?
Well, first of all, it's 119 episodes. How incredibly awesome is that? That's super fun.
Grateful for that.
We're grateful for that, and I'm grateful for this episode that we're dropping today because it's our friends Jesse and Kaitlyn, who are awesome youth workers, by the way, from the central part of our country. And they actually have a really wonderful look on youth ministry during the pandemic over the last 12 to 18 months, where they've said, hey, you know what? God's been at work, shockingly, doing some good things. And there's some things that we can learn from the pandemic and celebrate out of the pandemic in terms of what we've been able to do with youth ministry. So, Jer, I'm really pumped about what they did here, and it's the right thing. And for me, it just reminds me God has been at work. He is at work, and he always will be at work. And we need to remember that when we're involved in the work we do. And they help us do that in some really practical ways. So I love it.
Well, and the other thing that I like about this is that this podcast is, of course, a part of the wider network of the youth worker community. And so it's fun when the voices that are talking about the content, that are having an interview, a conversation, they're fresh, they're different because they're a part of our community. And our community includes you, the people that are listening right now. You're a youth worker, you care about teenagers, you've got a small group that you invest in, you're volunteering. And because of that, you are part of a much broader community. And if you didn't know it, hey, welcome to the family. It's a great group of people. And honestly, there are thousands of folks just like you across our country, Canada, if you're listening from there, but even beyond. In the US, Australia, we've got people listening in from the UK and just all over, all sorts of different places. And so you're part of a big family, and we're loving that we get to invest into teenagers' journeys, in particular their spiritual journey, and what you do makes a big difference. Now, Sid, we want to tell people before we jump into the conversation, just two quick things, two notes from us because of that broader network that we're part of. Number one, we're going on tour, not like the Beatles went on tour. It's a little bit of a different kind of experience, but we are going across our country of Canada this fall. We would love to meet people if they are in the Canadian provinces.
Correct. And this is our third pivot on this experience in general. So we're in, we get it, we understand the journey. But what's super exciting for me, Jeremy, is that in October, we will be moving across the country with the Youth Worker Community Road Tour. We're looking forward to being in 21 locations over 16 days.
Maybe 22. We're in
maybe
negotiations with the 22nd, yeah.
We
maybe
are right
23.
now. I don't even know. Well, here's the deal, Jack. I don't even know who you're negotiating with right now, but you and I both know I could have a conversation tomorrow that could end up in another location.
We were just looking at another Manitoba location because we love Manitoba, and we only had one on the docket. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to that. The link's in the show notes. And then secondly, this fall, we're launching the fourth cohort of the Coalition. And the Coalition is a part of our family again, but this wonderful opportunity over a couple of years for you to join in with other youth workers that are just like you, needing and wanting to expand a bit of their own education, their own expertise. And the Coalition, over those 2 years, we apprentice you alongside of some veterans in ministry, and you actually can accredit the whole experience as a part of the Coalition at the bachelor's or the master's level. People are going to be getting their Master of Arts for spending 2 years hanging out with us. Now, you don't have to leave your job. You don't have to leave your home. This is all meant to be while you're doing ministry in your local context, that you get some of this extra education, a little bit of this apprenticeship, this community, and then at the end can graduate with, if you're looking at the master's program, a Master of Arts, which is unreal. So link for that in the show notes.
Affordable. It's affordable.
Super
it's accessible. Super affordable, like game changer. So I love it. We just taught a class all last week, had a full modular with students from, literally across the country. such a great experience, and the experience continues on after the class is over. You got to come. Like, honestly, Jer, people have to get into this. It is such a great experience to be a part of.
Yeah, super fun. But let's jump to the conversation that Kate and Jesse got to have about a discipleship through COVID and what they are learning. We're looking forward to it.
Welcome to the Youth Ministry Team Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the team of volunteers. So this podcast is for the whole team. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you're asking so you can be encouraged and equipped as you head into your role in your youth ministry this week.
Hey, Youth Ministry Team Podcast listeners. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. Before we get going on today's topic of conversation, I'm going to quickly introduce myself and then hand it over to my friend Jesse to do the same, so you know who you're going to be listening to today. My name is Kaitlyn Giddings, and I am currently living in southern Saskatchewan in a small town called Cairnport. I currently serve at Briarcrest College and Seminary as the Director of Youthquake, and I have been in this position for just over a year. But I've been around Briarcrest College for the past 6 years as I completed my undergrad in psychology. I also serve as a small group leader at Briarcrest Christian Academy for grade 12 girls, and I absolutely love it. Jesse, who are you?
Awesome. My name is Jesse. I graduated from Vanguard Bible College just 2 years ago, and I'm now currently serving as a junior high youth pastor at a church in Sherwood Park, Alberta. I actually graduated college with a major in music and worship, and I had originally planned on becoming a worship pastor. But as he does so often, God had different plans, and he led me into youth ministry, and I could not be happier that he did. And honestly, I can't imagine myself doing anything different.
We are so excited to be sharing with you all today and hope that we can provide some takeaways for you to apply in your particular setting right away. Jesse and I both come from pretty different backgrounds and are serving in different roles, but we hope that the diversity from our experiences over the past year are helpful and we can provide some insight into how we think we should move forward after COVID.
Yeah, when we got together and started chatting through what we wanted to talk about, one of the big things that came to our mind is all the shifts and changes that everybody in ministry needed to make when COVID hit, right? It was like full stop. We all need to reevaluate everything that we did, change up the script, and keep going. And so we wanted to think now over a year into COVID, what are the things that we actually learned from COVID that we want to keep doing in ministry? And what are the things that we want to throw away and never do? And one of the ways that we've kind of thought about this is just having an open-handed approach to ministry. I think youth ministry has not changed for a long time, for several decades. You know, it might be different if you're in a different context, a big church, a small church, urban, rural, whatever it is for you. But largely youth ministry has looked fairly similar. And this has been our first opportunity in a really long time to actually just hold everything open-handed and say, what's actually working really well, and what are the things that we just do for the sake of doing them because they've always been done. And so for us, what we really wanted to talk about and nail down today is what are the things that COVID actually forced us to do, but we actually think that they're going to make us more effective going forward.
Yeah, I think that everything Jesse just said is so true for my context in particular. When COVID hit, my team had to immediately start thinking through what this next year was going to look like. So for myself, Youthquake is a youth conference, an in-person retreat that we have every year on our college campus. And after COVID, we knew full well that that was not going to happen. So we needed to figure out what made the most sense for our team to do for our community of youth groups that normally attend Youthquake. So for us, we didn't see too much value in trying to copy and paste our traditional model of in-person retreat to a virtual experience. So we wanted to try something new for us. So as we started chatting with our youth workers and different youth groups that normally attend Youthquake, we found that they were actually having really good success in their youth ministry programs online. So we wanted to partner with them in that and try to provide as many resources as we could to keep that success going. So instead of having a one-weekend virtual retreat experience, we decided to expand our resources into a 4-week series that the youth workers could then access for free and use within their particular context in whatever way made the most sense for their group. And looking back, I am so excited that we had the opportunity to do this, even though in the moment it didn't seem like the best alternative. Now, moving forward, we see how successful it was and how many benefits we were able to see from it. And we're going to continue offering something similar to this in the years to come. And so in having to have our open-handed mindset with Youthquake and what that retreat looked like, we were able to do something brand new and now implement it into the years to come, while still hopefully looking forward to doing something in person eventually, but knowing that we can still provide for our youth pastors and our youth groups that come, and just meeting them where they're at in this season.
I think for me, obviously the big change that everybody needed to do last year when COVID started was just take all of your in-person programming, move it all online. I remember very distinctly the week in March where it was just full stop on in-person ministry. Everything needs to go online. And I think every youth pastor ever, anywhere was like, what does that look like? What platform do I use? And so I think because of that, a lot of our first instinct was just to take everything exactly how we did it in person and just move it online and just make it look exactly the same. And I think that was fine. We needed to start somewhere, and that's something that we were comfortable with. But I think as I've learned and as I've grown over this past year, and as I look back, I think I can see all the things that we shifted and that we changed as we moved everything online in the exact same way. There was definitely moments where I was like, you know what, this just does not work online. You know, it's not as funny online. It's not as engaging. The kids just don't get it. It just does not work. And on the flip side, there's also things where I was actually really surprised with how well it worked online. And I was like, I've never had this type of response when I did this thing in person as we are now having this response online. And so that was kind of what it's looked like for me, is just going through how our youth ministry has looked and said, you know, what are the things that actually work better in person? And we're just going to save them for when we can do that again. And what are the things that actually work better online? And let's continue to press into that. And that's kind of the goal of our podcast today, is sharing what we believe are our 4 biggest takeaways of what COVID has taught us. And we actually think 4 things that will actually make you more effective in youth ministry going forward. So Kate, why don't you introduce us to our first point?
Absolutely. So the first thing that we discussed when talking about this subject was we just saw higher engagement overall. And so when I was reflecting on this and thinking about how I had to shift things specifically for my small group girls, when they had to leave school in the spring as soon as COVID hit, we moved our small group time to over Zoom. And I was actually really nervous about this. I did not think that the conversation was going to flow or that they would be very engaged or involved, but it blew my expectations out of the water, and the girls were so much more engaged and we had way more fun than I thought we were going to. And I think for the first time, it was because I started speaking their language and I was meeting them on their platform. So when I think about us in a classroom trying to have our normal small group discussions, and you just feel the silence in the air and you're just waiting for that one person to kind of say something and break it, it can be so much more pressure. But when we moved to online and they had the chat box and then they had the cameras and they were seeing each other, it was actually a lot more fun, because this is how they communicate with each other every day. My girls, they text, they FaceTime, they're on Snapchat constantly, and that's just how they know how to have conversation. And so they were all way more comfortable than I was. And the conversation, like I said, flowed so much better. They were so much more engaged than I thought they would be. And it was me that had to try to figure out, okay, this is actually how they know how to talk to each other. And this might be a really good for us moving forward. And so in the spring and in the summer, we actually continued meeting, even though that wasn't normal for us to keep talking in the summer, but because they wanted to. And so when we came back together in the fall, the conversation and the engagement was still so much higher. And so I think the one takeaway for me was just trying to bring them into what I know a small group should look like, or what I was told to do my small group like. Wasn't necessarily the best thing for them, but as soon as we got to speak their language and go into their context, it totally changed the game. So for me, just knowing that the engagement was so much higher on Zoom, in this next summer where we're going to be a little bit apart again, I want to still have those Zoom meetings, because we're not all going to be in the same place. We're not going to be able to meet together in person, but I know the conversation and everything will be still so good over Zoom. And so all my girls are in grade 12 and they're leaving, so it's so sad. So maybe this is even something that we can continue on into next fall as they're in completely different contexts as they start on different paths. So that's for me the one thing that I saw. Jesse, how did you see higher engagement in your group?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head when you said that you were speaking their language. And I think honestly, over this past year, I feel like this is the first time I actually spoke my students' language ever. And the first time that actually I was forced to go where they were and actually meet them where they were at. And like you said, right, like so many of our students are so comfortable communicating online and through social media and video calls and whatever it is. And so I think as we began to actually meet them where they were at and speak their language, I just saw engagement go way higher. One of the examples that I often think about is actually in terms of baptism testimonies. I think, a couple of years ago, a lot of churches do this now pretty regularly, but that transition from, being on the stage by yourself, your hands are shaking, you're holding a mic and you have to share this personal testimony in front of your whole church versus doing a video testimony. And I remember some people being like, do video testimonies count? Like if you can't, go up on stage and share your testimony in front of the church, like then are you ready to get baptized? And actually, I think it was such a huge win to start doing video testimonies because we were doing something that people were comfortable with already, and that was the language that they were speaking. And so in the same way, I think we've seen that a ton in youth ministry. And I actually remember over this past year, the very exact night that I actually realized how significant this was. So in our ministry, we were meeting over Zoom every Wednesday night. And I really wanted to have kind of a prayer time, like your classic youth ministry, like come to the front, nail your prayer request to the cross kind of thing. It gets prayed over. Just this kind of really cool moment where we can lift each other up in prayer and submit prayer requests. And so for that whole week, I was racking my brain, like, how do we do this on Zoom? How do we do this well? How do we create an opportunity for students to pray with and for each other, but then also to be able to submit prayer requests anonymously? And so I was really stressed about it. And so we kind of decided we'll do it on Zoom, but we're just going to use the chat box. So because there is a good number of students on, I didn't want them all unmuting because that gets a little bit crazy. And so everyone stayed muted except for me. And we did this whole prayer time using the chat box. So they were going to submit prayer requests in the chat, and then other students were actually going to type out prayers in the chat and pray over each other that way. And I remember talking to my coworker earlier on in the week and actually just saying to him, like, I really don't know how this is going to go. Like it could be a total bust, but like worst case scenario, maybe a leader or two submits a prayer request and we pray for it and like we move on and no one needs to know that it was a complete failure. Fast forward to our youth night and we get to it and I kind of set up the moment and I'm telling you, like we could not keep up with the amount of prayer requests that were being submitted and we could not keep up with the amount of prayers that were being prayed. And it was this really cool moment for me to actually reflect and say, I think I'm speaking their language for the first time. Because I think if I was, on stage in person and I was just like, hey, come to the front, grab the mic and pray over your friend, I don't know how many students would be comfortable coming up and doing that. But because we met them where they were at and spoke their language using this way of technology and communicating how they're so used to, so many students got prayed over. It was honestly an incredible experience to see just how that went and how that helped our engagement. So that was really cool. And that kind of leads us into our second takeaway of this talk, and that's being more vulnerable or more vulnerable conversation. It was actually cool just reflecting on that same story. One of the really significant things that happened is because you could submit the prayer requests anonymously, we had a grade 10 girl who submitted a prayer request because her parents were going through a divorce. And so she was, asking for prayers of peace and comfort for her family and that everything would, turn out okay and that God would just be with her. And so she submitted it anonymously through the chat and we put it up for all the other students to see. And it was really cool because her older sister, who's in grade 10, also was on the call. And she didn't know that was her sister who submitted the prayer request. But then she typed out in the chat, God, I pray for this person who's going through this divorce. My family's going through the same thing. And so I know how she feels. And so I just pray, God, that you would be with her and comfort her and, whatever else she said. And it was so cool because I literally had a sister praying for another sister for their parents' divorce, and they had no idea that they were praying for each other. And I don't know what the relationship is like outside of youth, if that's something that they would do or not. But it actually just spoke to the vulnerability that I think COVID has brought us all into. One of the other ways that I think of it is being in ministry, especially student ministry. So many of us know that when you have a shared experience, it helps you speak into a student's life, right? A lot of us have had these times where it's like, you struggle with mental health or anxiety or, bullying or whatever it is for you. And as soon as you share it, then you have all these students who are like, I've been through that same thing. And now they're comfortable talking to you about it. And so I think one of the cool things that COVID did was it gave all of us this shared experience, right? There's not one student, not one leader who COVID didn't affect, right? It affected all of us, and it affected all of us differently, but just in some really profound ways. And so it actually invited us all into these vulnerable conversations where, we've all been there in the small group, and it's like, how are you guys doing? How's your heart? And they're like, yeah, good. Like, I'm fine. Like, I have a math test, and that's as far as it goes, right? But we know, especially if you're like a small group leader, a youth worker, you long to have these vulnerable conversations, but sometimes we just don't know how to get there. And so I think one of the cool things that COVID actually forced us to do was actually open up to each other about how we're doing. And I think, and my encouragement to you is to keep this going after COVID is over, and in your years of ministry ahead, don't let this go. Because I think if we stop doing it, it will be really hard to bring it back. But if we move on from this and continue to press into those vulnerable conversations, our discipleship of students is going to go so much farther than we ever thought it could. So that's something that I've seen in terms of vulnerability. What about for you, Kate?
Yeah, that's so good. I absolutely love that story of the two sisters and them praying over each other. I just think you're so right. Like, you don't know what that relationship is like, outside of youth group. And if they were in person, like, who knows if they would have taken the time to pray over one another, or if they were doing that in their own home. But the fact that they both felt safe and open enough to do that for each other in that Zoom chat that you had set up, I think that is just exactly what you said, meeting kids where they're at, speaking their language, and just having the opportunity to be more vulnerable in those moments. And I think you even said it, when we talk about meeting with small groups or having those, circles where you're like, all right, now it's time for prayer requests. I remember in my first year with my small group girls, I'm pretty sure I exclusively got, I have a science test, I have a math test, I have a big paper due. And it was all just school related. And every part of me wanted to be like, no, give me something else. But, you just have to wait for it. And, as a relationship and everything builds, you get more open and more vulnerable. But you're exactly right. Having the common experience of COVID and everything that changed for everyone. It wasn't just for the youth. It wasn't just for me. Like, it was for them, their parents, their siblings, their school. Everything totally changed. And we now have that common experience. It was a week out after all my girls had to leave because Briarcrest Christian Academy is a boarding school. So a lot of them don't live in Caronport. They're from kind of all over. And it was a week out. We had our first small group meeting, and I asked for prayer requests, and every single one of them started listing off what they were struggling with. And a lot of it had to do with loneliness and boredom and confusion, anxiety over COVID. And I think you're right that it just opened up the conversation to be more vulnerable. And if we don't keep pressing into that and keep really digging to keep that conversation open, it could go away really quickly. And that could be pretty dangerous because we'll go back and resort back to just kind of the default answers that we know and we feel safe with. But having this common experience to reflect on and to keep kind of resorting back to is going to be really helpful moving forward. And I think for me, just one of the examples that I had with YouthQuake when we ran YouthQuake at home was our content had a series that ran throughout the 4 weeks. And within the talks, there was questions that divided up the content. And so the youth pastors would have to pause and then bring up the question, have a discussion with their group. And all of the feedback that we got back from the youth pastors were just excitement over the amount of conversation and discussions that were continuing on after their Zoom calls, after they would watch the video, because the questions were so engaging and their kids were so engaged with the content, and they were open and vulnerable and ready to talk about these things with each other in this way. And then the conversations that continued, they would have them, just through text after the chat was done, or they would hear of small group leaders that were continuing on the same conversations in their small group times afterwards, because they were just so ready to now talk about these topics. And I think that it's really exciting to, have this open-handedness and open-mindedness for our students, and that they feel ready and safe to talk about it. And I think moving forward, that the idea of safety is going to be really key, because you can't be vulnerable unless you feel safe. And so just really encouraging you guys at home, whatever it's taking for your students to feel safe and to have these conversations with you, make that your priority, because that is what's going to keep these conversations growing and getting your relationships deeper and deeper. And I'm just really excited right now for where we're at and for the opportunities that are ahead, but we need to keep pressing in because we could lose it really quickly. So this kind of moves into our third takeaway, which is just intentionality. And what Jesse and I both kind of chatted about with this conversation is that we have seen so many youth pastors, small group leaders, volunteers, just kind of all levels within the church or ministry body, like becoming so much more intentional with their students and with their congregations. And it's, again, just so exciting to see the ways that we are being creative in how we reach out to our students. And I think that the biggest shift for this, and Jesse's going to talk a little bit more about it, is we have moved from the one youth group night a week, the one Sunday service, the one like church event that I go to a week, to a 7 days a week constant conversation. And it just all builds from that intentionality. You know, you have the small group leader reaching out, texting, phoning, wanting to do things outside of the youth night or outside the Sunday service. And it's just opening up that conversation to be more vulnerable and to be more engaging, like the first two takeaways that we saw. So I think that this idea of intentionality really needs to stay, and this mindset shift from one day or one night a week to 7 days a week is going to be crucial moving forward. Jesse, how have you seen this in your church or in your youth group or with your leaders?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And it's moved away from, if you want to be discipled, if you want to be mentored and cared for, and if you want to be part of our ministry, then you need to come to our 2 hours from 7 to 9 on Wednesday, or whatever it is, whatever night it is for you, and actually moving just to a daily thing, to a youth ministry 7 days a week. And that doesn't mean that all you can do in your whole life just has to be your role as a youth leader. But what it does mean is just continuing to press in and be intentional besides your one night, your one, chunk of programming. And so for me, even with my youth leaders, I know I have not checked in on my leaders more than I did this year ever. It's become a pretty common practice for me to just shoot them a text, give them a phone call, go for a walk with them, whatever you're allowed to do, and just ask them how they're doing, where they're at in life, asking for prayer requests. I have not been more on top of, praying for my leaders ever before than I have been this year, because I've been able to actually just continue to check in on them. And the crazy thing about this is that it's something that we could have always been doing before, and some of us are better at it than others. But I think COVID actually really just forced us to do it a little bit more. And so for my leaders, I saw this shoot way up, that it wasn't just, I'll mentor and I'll disciple my leaders in small group time. It's actually texting them the day they have a test, or, if they have a stressful thing, or if they have a family member who's sick, or whatever they have going on in their life, just continuing to be, like you said, Kate, just continuing to be really, really intentional with them and to do life intentionally with them. And I think we've seen just a shift in how our students actually approach and appreciate their leaders, because now their leaders have set, an atmosphere that says that, my ministry to you is not just on Wednesday night, but I'm actually available to you anytime. And if you need me, call me, text me, whatever it might be, let's do life together. And so that kind of leads us into our fourth and our final takeaway, which we're just calling life experiences. And it's really closely tied to our last one, in that I think when you increase in intentionality and when you invite people into that, actually you invite them into your life experiences. And I think when I think of discipleship, I even see that as something Jesus did really well with his disciples, right? It's not like he, called Peter, James, and John and was like, hey, Wednesday nights, we're going to heal some people and feed 5,000. No, he just invited them into his life, and they learned and were discipled by him. And so in the same way, I've seen that happen, but it had to start with my leaders actually initiating that to their students. So one of the cool stories that I remember actually from last October is because my leaders started to think about ministry in more than just Wednesday night, and they started to invite them into just their day-to-day rhythms and the things that they were doing in life. I remember in October, my grade 8 boys group actually texted and invited their leaders to go trick-or-treating with them, which I just thought was so cool. And they had all these pictures, and they still talk about it to this day as like a highlight over this past year. And my leaders didn't initiate. They didn't text the students and ask them what they were up to. Literally, the students reached out to them and were like, hey, we'd love it if you came trick-or-treating with us. And because of that, going forward now, that group hangs out all the time. They go for bike rides, they'll walk to 7-Eleven for Slurpees or whatever it is, and they're just doing life together. And I think that's where you're actually going to see a lot of the most intentional conversations happen. And a lot of that discipleship happened just in the day-to-day. And I think that's been really significant and something that I really hope that we continue to press in and see as we move on from this. What does that look like for you, Kate?
Yeah, I think that's so cool. I wish that my small group girls invited me to go trick-or-treating with them, but they're in grade 12, so who knows if they even went. But I just have seen pretty much the same thing, and I'm just so blessed that it's been like personally with me. Just chatting with my girls, we've been together for 2 years now, and just seeing that transition of meeting once a week, having these conversations, and then, eventually going for coffees like one-on-one to try and get a little bit more intentional, a little bit closer and deepen that relationship. So to hopefully, make the conversation when we're all together a little bit better. But it wasn't until I did exactly what you said, reaching out and saying like, I'm available to you like whenever you need, like you reach out if you need something. And like I said, my girls are not all from Caronport. So like a lot of them aren't close to their parents. And so I'm like, if you need anything like more serious, like you can text me, you can call me, and I will be there. I will show up. And I think having that really obvious and having an experience where that happened and then they all kind of realized that really changed the game for me and my girls, because then it was that reverse where then they started inviting me or being like, well, you could text me, Kate, or like they were texting me, and it's just kind of back and forth, and actually seeing a relationship form and come out of that, which I think is just obviously the point and the hope for most small group leaders, that they would get to that point with their group. And having those life experiences is just going to be the cherry on top of those relationships, because you can do youth group and you can do the one night a week where you hear the message, you have the discussion on whatever topic, but it's going to be in those bike rides or in the going for slushies or going bowling and doing those everyday kind of activities, and, having those conversations outside of the structure that they're, being introduced to them to is going to be the biggest impact for them. And it's just really exciting to know that we have these conversations in the context of small group, but then they text me about it later, or we have a coffee and they dig a little bit deeper, or they maybe had some questions and they just had to think about it. And, a week later, they're coming up with more. And I just, really want to emphasize the idea of inviting them into your life, because I think that is where it's going to have the biggest impact for them moving forward. And so one little example that I just want to share, and I don't even have all the details, but it was with my boss, and he always shares this with any small group leader who's just kind of starting out. And he told this to me when it was my first year of being a small group leader for my girls. He said, you will have conversations with your girls in the context of small group, in your 45-minute discussion, and it'll be fine. But the conversations that they're going to remember are going to be the ones where they're helping you wash your car, or when you're going bowling, or when, you're going on a walk or something like that. Because he said for him, the only conversation he ever remembered from when he was a youth with his youth pastor was the one time that he accidentally bumped into him while he was out for a bike ride, and he just happened to be washing his car, and then he stayed to help him. And it was like one of the most impactful conversations that he ever had with him. And I think that that is just such a testament to like what we're supposed to be doing as small group leaders and as people who are reaching out and connecting with students like this, is just show them what your everyday life looks like and try to just be the best model that you can be for them, and hope that that's what they take away from your experience together. So that's the one takeaway here. Life experiences, invite them into your life and watch as they invite you back into theirs.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Hey, these are the 4 takeaways that we think are really important and will make your ministry actually a lot more effective going forward. But like we talked about, our encouragement to you is just to have an open-handed approach as you continue doing ministry and continue to disciple students. So for you, maybe your takeaways are different. Maybe you're in a different context, have a different group in a different kind of church, whatever it is for you. Our encouragement to you is look back on this last year and say, hey, what did COVID force me to do that's actually going to make me more effective in discipling students going forward? And just press into those things, and also be okay to throw out some of the things that weren't helping you before and aren't going to help you going forward. So thank you so much for taking the time and listening to us, and bless you as you continue to reach out and disciple students.
Hey, before you guys go, first off, thanks to Jesse and Kate. Honestly, that was such a helpful conversation. And if you want to get in touch with them, or if you want to talk a little bit more about that, all of those things, those ideas, if you want to throw out your own ideas, if you want to ask some questions, all the ways to get a hold of us, youthworker.team, drop a note in the form. That email comes straight into me. And so that's just the easier way to get a hold of me. But you can email me too directly. I'm jeremy@youthworker.community. And I can give you Sid's number if you wanted to text him. All that kind of stuff was worthwhile. But Sid, before they go, Trinity Western makes this podcast happen because of their partnership with us. So we got to tell people about Trinity Western. What's up about them?
Yeah, I'm so thankful for the work that Trinity Western University is doing in our country, and not just in our country, but literally around the globe. The way that they're equipping and inspiring young adults to do significant work in all sorts of different areas within our communities and within our countries, both in in vocational ministry type roles or in roles that are outside of vocational ministry, where you figure out what does it look like as a follower of Christ to really be excellent in these areas, doing the work that God's called me to do. So we love how Trinity prepares us for that. We think they do a wonderful job. And then the other thing I really love, Jer, is I love the work that they're doing as far as the development and formation of individuals within their community. So their leadership and spiritual development that's happening within dorms, I think, is just so intentional and really thoughtful. And I just know that I've had the opportunity to be around a number of their graduates, number of their students who are still going through the university in different environments that we work in, Jer. And it's just been a real privilege to know them. They're sharp leaders. We love the work that they do. And we love how God is using Trinity Western University to shape the next generation of leaders. So youth workers, if you have students that are looking into post-secondary education, please consider Trinity Western University. We love what they are doing.
Absolutely. All right, we'll see you back here next week for another episode of the Youth Ministry Team Podcast.